Hi, I'm Anna Covington, and I've been working on a project that looks at how we can teach observation skills to medical students using art. Diagnostic errors are a huge problem in the US. They're the most common form of physician malpractice and are related to 80 to 160,000 deaths a year. And these errors have cost almost 40 billion between 1986 and 2010. There are plenty of ways to reduce errors, like mandating a diagnostic checklist for all physicians. But as this is my education capstone, the question really is, how do we train physicians to make fewer diagnostic errors? And this question has opened up a window for a case for art training in medicine. And I'm going to play this brief clip to give a little bit of background on that.
This program, Enhancing Observational Skills, was started at Yale University approximately 10 years ago, and it is a very unique collaboration between two Yale institutions. One is the Yale School of Medicine, and the other is the Yale Center for British Art. It has been imitated now by at least 20 medical schools across the country.
I was running this conference and I asked the residents to describe their cases, and they weren't doing a very good job. I was wondering, how could I get them to do this better? And at that moment, a painting popped into my head as being something that would be foreign to most of the residents. They would probably describe everything in that object because they didn't know what was important or unimportant.
The two of us then thought about what we could do together, if indeed we could, in terms of trying to offer a program that could enhance medical students' observational skills. And that really is the genesis of the program. We selected pictures that had a narrative, that is, that there was an implicit story within the work of art itself.
And it's this 19th century art, these Victorian paintings that really are so helpful for us, and that they really behave like surrogates for patients.
I encourage you to watch the rest of that video. They go into activities they do in the museum, and it is really interesting. But, anyways, they evaluated the effectiveness of this program and found that students were 10% more likely than their peers who had not participated to notice important details about patients. As they mentioned, more schools have incorporated programs like this into their curriculum, and research evaluating these types of programs is really what I was interested in looking at for my project. So moving to my research questions, first, simply, do these programs work? Do they improve visual observation skills in medical students? And further, which aspects of these programs are most important? I was interested in looking not only at research that directly evaluates features like program duration and type of art, but also identifying commonalities among these programs and paucities in the literature. What aspects haven't been compared and evaluated, so that I could make recommendations for future research. So I started by going through three databases looking for articles with the keywords medical school, art, and observation skills. I looked through their titles and was able to eliminate ones that obviously did not meet inclusion criteria, whether that was because they didn't use visual art and used something different like dance or drawing, if they weren't in the US, if they weren't using health profession students, and if they were not a peer reviewed experimental or case study. And then of those 49 articles, I looked at their abstract or full text if necessary to see if they met all of the inclusion criteria, and that ended up being 16 articles. So what I found is that in all of these articles, visual arts-based programs do improve observation skills. And observation skills were measured quantitatively as the number of accurate observations made. And at first, I was wondering if number of observations was a valid way to measure and define observation skills, because in my mind, it would incorporate other aspects such as efficiency and the type of observations made. But I've decided this does make sense because Dr. Braverman, the Yale medical professor from the video, as he noted, med students weren't completely accurately and fully describing what they saw in patients. So increasing the number of accurate observations truly is the goal of most of these programs. And here I have a picture of what a student wrote before and after doing one of these programs, and feel free to pause and read over that. But the general idea, what these quantitative studies find is that after these programs, students make more observations that are more accurate, and they're looking at more aspects of the picture. not just at the body, but expressions and feelings, and looking at what the person is wearing and the setting that they are in. And then there are less studies that look qualitatively at observation skills, but when they do, they're looking at the number of inferences made from confirmable observations. So looking at how students are making meaning out of these observations and not just the number. So to back up, let's remember that we're looking at observation skills because ultimately we want to produce doctors with better diagnostic skills. And two studies actually looked directly at how these types of programs influence diagnostic skills. And one study measured these skills as the number of different diagnoses provided for patient photographs and found that this number was increased for students who attended the program. And then the other study actually used standardized patients or patient actors and found that students were more likely to come up with the correct diagnosis. Also important to note is that there is an overwhelming amount of positive student support for these types of programs. This is important to know because if medical schools are considering implementing similar programs, they want to know that students will actually take advantage of them. Moving into my second research question about important aspects of these programs, first is a list of common features I noticed that were not explicitly evaluated. Um, First is student collaboration. A lot of them had this, and I was trying to understand why, and it was never explicitly described. But in the video from the beginning, they go on later to say that an unintended consequence of their program was improved communication and teamwork, which are obviously very important skills for doctors and huge components of medical school activities and courses. So I'm thinking it might just be another way to incorporate that. Other common features included being taught by medical faculty and art educators and being at a museum, which I'm guessing is to increase access to the art educators. I also found that longer durations better. Students who went to more sessions um, had better observation skills. And in looking at the types of art that best teach observation skills, representational or realistic art is better than non-representational. And medically related art is helpful but not necessary, meaning that students in programs that looked at non-medically related art still showed improvements in observation skills. Based on their success and student support, I would recommend that more medical schools incorporate visual arts based courses to improve observation and diagnostic skills. In terms of design, the best programs will use clinically related representational art and have a long duration. I've also realized that more studies are needed to directly assess diagnostic skills opposed to the middleman of observation skills. To wrap up, I want to mention a couple of limitations and where I think we should go next. First, many of the studies look at already existing programs, so the subject samples are people with baseline interest and intrigue in the topic, which could skew results. Second, there's a lot of heterogeneity that exists within the subject samples. There are different yeared med students, and we would expect a fourth year student to have more refined observation skills than a first year. Also, there are many studies that use medical and nursing students, which I don't think specifically limits the results of those papers. But moving forward and trying to understand how to best design these programs, I think it would be worthwhile to separate samples based on professional schools and target programs towards more narrow goals. In the future, it would be interesting to see if these improvements in observation and diagnostic skills persist. One study sent surveys to students who took a visual arts course 1 or 2 years prior, and students reported that their observation skills had lasted, but it would be interesting to assess this experimentally instead of with student surveys. Lastly, more research is needed to understand the broad role arts and humanities can play in medicine. There's a plethora of research showing that health humanities courses improve empathy, emotional expression reading, communication skills, and more. Interdisciplinary learning is the direction medical education is moving, and I'm very excited to watch how medical schools will continue to adapt their curriculum to produce better doctors and doctors who can interpret more about their patients. That's all I have. Thank you so much for watching. And I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Hutt and Danny for really guiding me and the rest of the students through this process. I have felt really supported and on track because of everything you guys have done, and I've really enjoyed this experience. So thank you so much, and reach out, let me know if you have any questions.